Hi everybody, this is Jim Davis again with DVS Direct. We're going to do a little bit of tech tips here today on configuring pan-tilt zoom cameras that are using Visca or RS232 control. Here we have our little PTZ optics pan-tilt zoom camera, and if you look on the back here we have these two little mini DIN connectors where basically it's a Visca or RS232 control protocol. A lot of pan-tilt zoom cameras will have this. That's kind of a Sony standard, and you'll find a lot of cameras with this. So we've had some questions about how to configure the control of the camera in the Tricaster software. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So one of the first things you need, since there's not an actual RS232 port on the Tricaster, is an RS232, a USB to RS232 adapter. We have a couple here. This one here is a single adapter. Basically, on one end you got a RS232 port, and on the other end it's USB. It just plugs into the into one of the USB ports on the Tricaster. Then we also have this one, which I kind of like, because if we're doing multiple cameras and I'm running cables to different places, I may want to be able to run cables individually to each camera position along with the video connection. And this guy here is basically 4 ports. It's got 4 RS232 ports on it, and on this side we got a USB port. So that's the first thing you need. The second thing you need is a RS232 to mini DIN adapter cable, which with the PTZ optics cameras come with it. Some of the other cameras may or may not come with it. They're easily enough, you can get them online. They're very inexpensive. So one of the problems that we run into when we're configuring a PTZ camera using RS232 protocol is figuring out which COM port we're going to use. This can be a little confusing because in addition to the adapter, if you're connecting a control surface like a CS460 or a CS Mini or a Time Warp, it also uses the same serial port or similar serial ports to configure for or communicate with the control surface. So what you need to do is you got to kind of decipher which COM port is going to the camera, because you'll need to know that to configure it. So let's take a look at how we're going to set that up. So I'm going to switch over here to the Tricaster, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of the Tricaster software and I'm going to go into Windows. So we'll get into Windows real quick. Now, normally when I'm doing this, I'm going to have the control surface already connected. And the reason for that is, or control surfaces, if there's a time warp and a control and a main control surface, I have them connected already, because then the COM ports will be assigned. So let's take a look. We'll just go to my computer and right-click and click on Manage, and then open up the Device Manager and go to Ports. And there you can see we have a couple different ports in the machine. Some of the COM ports are assigned to different things, so I like to have all this already configured before I connect the USB dongle. Now I like the 4-port dongle because it'll always assign the COM ports in the order the same way every time, whereas if I use these individual dongles and I plug them in, unless you label them or something, it's kind of hard to remember which one was what COM port. So let's take a look at what happens then when we plug in our USB to RS232 adapter. You'll see now we have more COM ports showing up. So give it a sec, and there now you can see we've got a bunch of extra COM ports. You can assign the COM numbers. If you right-click on one of the COM ports and go to Properties and go to Port Settings and Advanced, and there you can actually see where I can assign different COM ports if I want to. Now, you want to keep them under COM16, because in the software you're going to see that that's the top COM port. That's the last one that you can kind of get to. So I usually set them to the last four, 13, 14, 15, and 16 in this case, because I like to have, and I don't know if this needs to be this way, it's just the way I've done it and it seems to work, is I like to have the COM ports higher for the USB dongle above the control surfaces. Every now and then you'll get an error in the control in the Tricaster when you launch the session that says something to the effect control surface failsafe. And if you see that error, we may see it here, we may not, but if you see that error, just give it a few seconds and let the software find the control surfaces, and generally everything's going to work at that point. So let's go ahead and relaunch our Tricaster. And by the way, go back here real quick. You want to make note of the COM port numbers so that you can set them up in the software. Now, the way this particular dongle works, I've got the numbers labeled on the USB connectors themselves, so I know which one is which. You may have to go through some trial and error to determine, and this is where it gets confusing, you're trying to set up the COM port and you're not sure if you have four of them which one is which. So typically it's just a trial and error thing. Once you get them figured out, label them so that you know which one's the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. So, and once you do that, they'll always come up that way. So anyhow, so I've got these set up COM 13 through 16. Then I took the RS232 input on the camera and I connected it to the first port on the dongle. So that means that camera will be assigned to COM port 13. So now let's go ahead and launch my session. And once we get the session launched, what we're going to do is we're going to actually configure the camera control. So let's give it a second to launch. Now I'm running. Now as you can see, the error up there says failsafe has recovered connection to your control surface. Typically that is a harmless error. Give it a few seconds, and once the control surface is lit up, which mine is now lit up, everything typically works. If you see that error, don't worry about it. It's just something about the way the system polls the different COM ports to find out where the control surfaces are, as far as I can tell. So anyhow, what we're going to do is we're going to connect to the camera. So this is the version 2 of Advanced Edition, and in the version 2 of Advanced Edition, they moved where this is set up at. Normally on a regular standard edition Tricaster, if you go over and open up the gearbox under the monitor, you'll see the PTZ tab up here. But in Advanced Edition, they actually moved it over here. So we open it up here and we go to PTZ, and now you can see the different. We actually have 4 camera ports for control. And since my PTZ camera is hooked up to input number 2, I'm going to set it up on N2 in the control area. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here and find the second camera. And what we want to do is go to this pull down, and we're going to select RS232 Sony. Okay. Now once we do that, now we need to know the COM port number, which was, remember, it was COM port 13. So let's go ahead and select COM 13 here. There it is. Now once you do those two things, just click the checkbox. Now if we did everything right, you can see now the camera's resetting. So you can tell that your communication is happening correctly if the camera does that little maneuver once you click that box. So now we have our camera set up to control it. Now once we have the camera set up to control, how do we control it? Well, there's a couple different ways. This video is more about configuring the camera, but I will show you a little bit quickly, how we actually control the camera. So if we go down here in this part of the interface and you click on PTZ, and you'll see down here there's for your 4 cameras. We're using camera 2, so let's select camera 2, and now we have 8 presets that we can use for setting up different scenes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up the gearbox, and now we can just move the camera. We can set it. We can have it, reposition the camera however we want. Okay, and we'll just update that snapshot. So now it's created that preset for me. So I'll go to my second one, and maybe I'll set up another setting over here. Put it over there. There we go. And update snapshot. And so on and so forth. So what you can do is you can go through and configure the camera. You can zoom it in if you want to. To zoom, you just use the little, if you have a wheel on the mouse, just use that to kind of zoom your camera in a little bit. Update snapshot. And so on and so forth. So that's basically how you set up the controls. Now you can also control the camera dynamically using the control surface by I forget what the sequence is, but there's a command sequence where you can actually use the joystick on the CS460 or CS860 or 8000 to dynamically control the camera. But for what I'm doing, I find it works better to set up presets. So now once the presets are set, you can select one just by clicking on it. And you can do this in macros too, by the way, if you wanted to. You could set up macros to do like a whole bunch of different things and set it up. And you can see there it's going to the different positions that or different presets I've set up. You can also adjust the speed if I want to make that happen slower. I can slow down the speed of the camera. So if I had multiple PTZ cameras, I could go back in, connect each one of those up to one of those COM ports, and it's just a matter then of assigning that particular COM port to that particular input, and then each camera would be controlled individually. And like I said, I like to use the multi-channel RS232 converter, because then I can actually, I have this cable that's basically RG6 and then Cat5 cable that's Siamese together, and I can take that and run it to my camera positions and use the SDI over the RG6, and then the RS232 can come in over the Cat5 connection. I made these little adapters to go from the RJ45 connectors to just the regular old DB9 connectors for the serial port. So, well, that's about it for this video. I hope you found it helpful and interesting. And if you have any other questions about the Tricaster or whatever, feel free to email me or give us a call. Again, my name's Jim Davis with DVS Direct, and thanks for stopping by.